Okay, welcome to the last and final installment of fat metabolism. Basically, we'll have some additional considerations that we haven't looked into yet. So essentially, Meyer proposes that the regulation of food intake functions with such flexibility that an increase in energy output due to exercise is automatically followed by an equivalent increase in caloric intake. What does that mean? If you exercise, you increase calorie expenditure, but then you're hungrier and you eat more. This is looking at compensation mechanisms to weight loss. As we lose weight, if you look at behavioral compensation, that's the red, versus metabolic compensation, which is the blue. If we have a calorie deficit, then we may decrease energy expenditure, which is the 4 skipped training sessions. Or we may consume an extra energy dense snack after each session. Those are behavioral mechanisms, and they're very powerful. But we can also have reduced time/energy costs of non-exercise activity-induced thermogenesis, which we'll discuss later. Or we can have the reduced energy cost of exercise to become more efficient, or reduce metabolic rate. Now here's something I want to point out. If you look here, what we're looking at is energy expenditure. Okay, so you have high energy density is the black with no exercise, and then high energy density food with exercise. We can basically see, obviously, energy expenditure goes up when you add exercise. Same thing, you get energy expenditure, no exercise in a low energy condition, which is the white. Then we go up to low energy density with exercise, and that goes up. Okay, so now if we look at food intake, if you look at high energy density food with no exercise is the black underneath the intake part, it barely goes up when you add exercise. So in that case, you don't have a lot of supercompensation, right? However, what I want to point out is this. When you look at calorie balance, in large part, the expenditure that you have or the total net balance is going to be in large part dictated by the energy density of the food. So if you're eating high energy density foods, especially if it's fats and carbs combined, even if you're exercising rigorously, you'll likely have a greater negative energy balance with low energy dense foods, such as here. But there's a problem. Okay, clearly the density of energy foods impacts how much we eat, right? The problem is that even though exercise induces increases in energy expenditure, it's been shown that exercise-induced energy expenditure increases the desire for high energy density, high fat, plus high carb foods, like this guy right here. Okay, so there's 2 ways we can combat that. One, we can select out low energy density foods, or you can use low carbohydrate dieting alternatives such as ketogenic dieting, which you can fulfill those cravings and not gain fat. So here what we're looking at is that excessive exercise may not be the answer to weight loss. So exercise is important for fat metabolism, as we talked about earlier, but extreme amounts of exercise may not enhance that response. So what you're looking at here is body weight and body fat lost and fat-free mass gained in moderate exercise group, which is 300 essentially calories per day, and then the high fat loss group, or the high exercise group, was 600 calories per day expended through exercise. Notice that fat loss was not different. In fact, it appeared to favor the moderate group. So that's very important to understand. Basically, you do start to get to compensation when you go into these extreme exercise sessions, to where you become ravenous. And that's likely why we're seeing that the extreme 600 calories extra a day is not better than 300 calories per day expended through exercise. Now, why is this the case? Well, it turns out that there's a large amount of variability between subjects when we talk about the fat loss response. So what you're looking at here is a study. They had people exercise, and these are 18 subjects. Notice that subject 1 lost a great deal of fat, while subjects 16 through 18 actually gained fat. So there's a large variability between subjects. So in other words, we have responders to exercise and non-responders. Which suggests that if you're a responder to exercise, you may not need a diet. But if you're not a responder to exercise, you likely need diet plus exercise. So we think this variability may be explained by different responses for compensating with energy intakes. So here you see no exercise, and you have compensators versus non-compensators. Obviously, they don't need to compensate with no exercise. You have moderate intensity exercise and high intensity exercise. Notice that the compensators increase their energy intake above the non-compensators when it comes to actually adding exercise. So some people don't have a very good compensatory response. Some people have a big compensatory response. So if we look at non-exercise activity thermogenesis, first off, what is non-activity induced thermogenesis? Well, we in short call it NEAT, and it basically is standing, fidgeting, or cleaning. Okay, and what we think is that can account for a major component of energy expenditure. In fact, NEAT has been proposed to account for 30% of energy expenditure. So what you can see here is you're looking at calories expended per day, and you see activity thermogenesis. Activity thermogenesis is essentially calories expended by exercise and non-activity induced exercise thermogenesis. So what that's saying is that we fidget a lot. If we fidget a lot, if we pace a lot, things of that nature, that is NEAT. So that's very, very important. If you look, for example, kilocalories per day and in certain occupations, if you're chair bound, you might expend 300 calories sitting in that chair. If you're required to move in your job, it's 1,000 extra calories a day. If you're standing all day, or a homemaker, cleaning a lot, moving around, it could be up to 1,400 calories a day. And if you have strenuous work such as agriculture, that could be 2,300 calories a day. And we also see here, if you look at graph D, you can see that basically even chewing gum raises metabolic rate. Stair climbing, walking 1 mile an hour, and things of that nature. So one thing is that if you increase your exercise, we think that your body compensates by trying to lower its NEAT. And that may be one of the reasons why if you go really high extreme exercise, you feel tired all the time and you're not expending calories. So we see here time, moving or fidgeting, when we start adding exercise in between, which is INT or INTW, we see that there's a decrease in non-exercise activity induced thermogenesis. When we stop exercising, that comes back up to baseline. What I'm saying is that it's not just that you're compensating with food, you're compensating behaviorally by lowering your fidgeting and pacing activity. This is kind of a real good depiction, okay, of what this means. So this is looking at activity levels. If you're sedentary, you see not much, but this guy up here to your left. If you're an athlete, oftentimes we get, if you train twice a week, you might have 2 large bursts, okay? And by the way, how we measure energy expenditures is by physical activity level. We call it PAL, which is total energy expended over BMR. You see this cat over here is 1.33. If you look at this athlete, he's 2.09, but he only had 2 big bursts of activity. The rest he was sedentary. If you look at this, the house mom here, taking care of her kids, cleaning the house, her NEAT is actually more consistent bursts over the day, as well as the person to your right who's active all day. Even though they don't have 2 large bursts, their physical activity level is as high as the athlete, right? As far as total calories expended, and that's a lot of that's because of NEAT. So my point is that your lifestyle is as important, if not more important, than exercise. So in this study, they had one group do 3 days a week of step aerobics, ranging from 30 to 60 minutes, and they look at change in weight. And they had another group where they just taught them lifestyle changes. Park the car far away from the store door. Take the stairs instead of the elevator. Pace around. Things of that nature. Clean the dishes. Things of that nature. All of those are NEAT. If you look, basically both groups lost just as much weight, whether it was exercise or changing someone's life. So what this says is that oftentimes you might prescribe an exercise situation and the individual may not be making gains because they're compensating with NEAT going down. Now, they don't understand NEAT, understand the importance of it, but if you teach that to them, they can overcome that compensatory mechanism. One way we can also intervene to increase NEAT is a pedometer. Pedometer interventions appear to increase step count daily and hold individuals accountable. So what you're seeing here is I basically just gave people pedometers and looked at how many more steps that they got per day. You notice the average was 2,500 extra steps per day if you're wearing a pedometer versus not, because you're held accountable to get your activity up. General recommendations for health are 10,000. For weight loss, 12 to 15. And 1 mile comes out to about 2,000 steps. Now, here's the thing to understand is that we have to think, in this course, why is our society becoming more and more obese? Well, in large part, it's because we have more and more conveniences. And that's important to understand. If you look here, basically, we have this lady here washing dishes. Everyone used to wash dishes. Everyone used to wash clothes by hand, right? Now we have a dishwasher. And more conveniences are taking the place of what used to be really good ways to get NEAT. And so that's causing our society to get more and more obese. And so we have to think of creative ways to overcome this, right? Again, we might have used to be working as farmers before, and now, maybe you get a nice cozy desk job. So, is there any possible future we can do for people in a desk job? Dr. Levine has a few suggestions here, this being a possible future, where you're standing and walking at a workstation, right? or cycling and working at your workstation. It's possible. It might happen. So conclusions, as with dieting, increased exercise can cause slight compensation for energy intake, as well as increased desire for palatable and high energy density foods. This can be combated by having lower calorie alternatives for or higher fat ketogenic dieting. Research also indicates a decline in NEAT. NEAT can be compensated for by changing your environment or changing or modifying and selecting NEAT activities you enjoy, such as walking and listening to music, gardening, etc. There's variability in the response to fat loss, and you must identify if someone can change with just exercise or likely needs the addition of caloric restriction or monitoring of NEAT. Thank you, and I'll see you next time.